Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're driving headfirst into your notes and this article, Patterns to Success with Agile. You know, it's funny. Every time I see the word agile, it feels like everyone's chasing after this like mythical beast of productivity. But
hmm
you and I both know it's but way more than just buzzwords, right?
Absolutely. It's like you've got all these ingredients, but Agile is really about the recipe, how you bring it all together. And what's exciting is that your notes highlight two key ingredients that are often overlooked: trust and empowered teams.
You know, that's what jumped out at me too,
Yeah.
especially where you wrote in the margin, how do we actually empower teams? It's like, okay, we say we want it, but how do we make it happen?
It's the million-dollar question, and the article hints at a fascinating answer: cross-functional teams. Now, this might seem obvious on the surface, but think about how many times you've seen projects get stuck because information or expertise was siloed in different departments.
Oh, tell me about it.
Yeah.
It's like trying to assemble a puzzle where everyone has a different section, but no one has the whole picture.
Exactly. And that's where cross-functional teams come in. Imagine having all the pieces of the puzzle: design, development, marketing, even someone representing the business needs, all working together in sync from the get-go.
Okay, so less like a relay race where you're just passing
Okay.
the baton, and more like what a jazz band, where everyone's riffing off each other in real time.
Now you're getting it. It's about breaking down those silos and creating an environment where everyone feels ownership over the final product.
Which brings us right back to trust, doesn't it? Because
Oh.
you can't have that kind of collaboration without a foundation of trust. And this is where the author's point about servant leadership really clicked for me. I mean, it's not exactly a term you hear every day.
Right. It's not your typical top-down management style. Servant leadership is about flipping the script. It's about leaders asking, what do you need to be successful? And then actively removing obstacles.
Instead of being the boss barking orders, it's more like being I don't know, a really supportive gardener,
Hmm?
making sure the team has the right soil, sunlight, and resources to flourish.
I love that analogy. And just like a good gardener, a servant leader knows when to step back and let the team do its thing. They trust their expertise and empower them to make decisions.
Okay, but hold on. We can't just throw around this word empowerment without
Hmm.
being real about what it means in practice. Because let's be honest, sometimes people hear empowerment and they think, oh, great, now I have no direction and no one to blame but myself when things go wrong.
That's a valid concern, and it highlights the importance of clarity. True empowerment can't exist without clear goals, expectations, and yes, even boundaries. It's not about chaos. It's about creating a space where people feel safe to take ownership, innovate, and maybe even, dare I say, fail occasionally.
Okay, I like where you're going with this because the article also mentioned shared accountability, right? So it's not just about individual responsibility, it's this collective understanding that we're all in this together.
Precisely. And shared accountability doesn't mean pointing fingers when things go wrong. It's about fostering a culture where everyone feels comfortable speaking up, sharing ideas, and yes, even admitting when they've made a mistake without fear of being thrown under the bus.
Which, let's be honest, can be scary.
Hmm.
And probably explains why the author links shared accountability with total openness and transparency. It's like you can't have one without the other, right?
Absolutely. It's about creating an environment where feedback is seen as a gift, not a threat. Where it's okay to say, hey, I'm struggling with this, or I have a different perspective
Yeah.
without fear of judgment.
It reminds me of this quote from your notes, actually. You wrote, radical candor, but make it kind. And I think that sums it up perfectly. It's about being honest and direct, but always with respect and empathy.
That's the key ingredient: kindness, because without it, all the other agile principles, the cross-functional teams, the servant leadership, they all fall apart.
It's like that Brene Brown quote, right? Vulnerability is not weakness, it's our greatest measure of courage. It takes guts to be open and transparent, especially in a work environment.
It does. But think about the payoff. When we have that foundation of trust and openness, we can start to embrace the other agile principles, like continuous flow of value, which I know can be kind of a head scratcher at first.
It does sound a bit like a corporate buzzword bingo card, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Continuous flow of value. But I think what trips me up is how is that different from just, working really fast and shipping things out the door?
That's the key difference. It's not about speed, it's about intentionality. It's about breaking down work into smaller, manageable chunks and delivering value incrementally, constantly getting feedback along the way.
Okay, so instead of waiting months for a big splashy product launch, it's more like launching a bunch of little ships, seeing which ones stay afloat, and then adjusting course as you go.
You've got it. It's about being adaptable, responsive, and always focused on delivering what the customer truly values. And that ties into another point that really resonated with your notes, value over activity.
Oh, yeah. This is where I scribbled, busyness is not a badge of honor. Because it's so easy to get caught up in the whirlwind of tasks and meetings and feel like you're accomplishing a ton, but are you really moving the needle?
That's a question, isn't it? And it's one we need to ask ourselves constantly. It's about being really discerning about what we choose to work on and being willing to say no to things that don't align with the overall goals.
Easier said than done right,
Yeah,
especially when you've got a million things on your plate and everyone wants a piece of you.
it's definitely a skill that takes practice. But think about it this way. Every time we say yes to something, we're essentially saying no to something else. So are we saying yes to the things that truly matter, the things that move us closer to our goals?
And that's where rapid risk reduction comes into play, right? Because if we're not constantly evaluating and mitigating risks, we're more likely to get sidetracked or worse, completely derailed. But I have to admit, I always thought risk reduction was more of a management thing, not so much an agile principle.
It's often overlooked, but it's essential. And it's not just about identifying potential problems, it's about addressing them quickly and proactively.
Hmm.
And this is where the attention to technical excellence comes in.
Okay, so how does writing clean code or having a robust testing strategy actually reduce risk?
Imagine building a house on a shaky foundation. You might be able to throw it up quickly, but it's going to cost you a lot more time and money to fix the cracks and structural problems down the line. But if you invest in a solid foundation from the start, you can build faster and with more confidence, knowing that the house can withstand whatever storms come its way.
Solid analogy. So in software development, that means investing in things like clean code, comprehensive testing. And this might sound obvious, actually understanding the user needs before you start building, right?
Exactly. It's about building quality into the process from day one, rather than trying to tack it on at the end when it's much more costly and time-consuming to fix.
And speaking of time, that brings us to another key factor, early feedback and adaptation. Now, this is something you highlighted multiple times in your notes, so it clearly struck a chord. What was it about this principle that resonated with you?
Well, I think we can all relate to the experience of pouring hours, days, even weeks into a project, only to realize that we were headed in the wrong direction all along. Early and frequent feedback is crucial because it allows us to course correct and make sure we're still on track.
It's like having a GPS for your project, right? It's not just about getting to the destination. It's about making sure you're still on the right path along the way. And that brings us like back full circle to trust. Because let's be real, you're not going to be receptive to feedback if you don't trust the person giving it, right?
Exactly. It's all interconnected, isn't it? Trust, openness, feedback, adaptation. These aren't just buzzwords. They're the cornerstones of a successful agile culture.
It's like building a human pyramid, right? You need a rock-solid foundation of trust to even attempt it, and then constant communication and adjustment to keep it from all collapsing.
I've never thought about it like that, but it's a perfect analogy, and it highlights something really important. Agile isn't just about following a set of rules or implementing a specific framework. It's about fostering an environment where people feel safe to experiment, learn, and grow together.
And sometimes that means stumbling and making mistakes, which is where that last factor comes and the one the author simply calls trust.
It's interesting, isn't it, how something so fundamental, so seemingly obvious, can be the most difficult thing to cultivate in a work environment.
It's like that old saying, trust takes years to build, seconds to break, and forever to repair.
So true. And I think that's why the author saves trust for last. It's not just one factor among many, it's the culmination of all the other principles we've discussed. When we prioritize cross-functional teams, empower team members, embrace transparency, and focus on delivering value, trust becomes the natural byproduct.
It's like this magical ingredient that makes all the other flavors pop right. Without it, you might have all the right elements, but the dish just falls flat.
Precisely. And that's what makes this deep dive so fascinating. It's not just about checking boxes on an agile checklist. It's about understanding the deeper principles at play and how they all come together to create something truly transformative.
So what does all of this mean for you, our listener? We've unpacked a lot today, but if there's one thing I hope you take away, it's this. Agile isn't about achieving some mythical state of perfect productivity. It's about embracing a set of values, a way of working that allows you to navigate complexity, adapt to change, and ultimately deliver real value to your customers and to yourself.
Beautifully said. And if I may add one final thought, it's this. Agile is a journey, not a destination. There will be bumps in the road, detours, and maybe even a few wrong turns. But it's in those moments of uncertainty, those opportunities for adaptation and growth, where the true magic of Agile unfolds.
And on that note, we'll leave you with something to ponder. How might you bring even just a little bit more trust and empowerment into your own work environment tomorrow? Something to chew on until next time. Thanks for joining us on the deep dive, where your knowledge is our adventure.